Introduce to you an analysis of a poem by Ted Hughes, a poet from Yorkshire, former poet laureate, and this poem, The Jaguar, is one that I studied when I was at school, and it stayed with me, I suppose, because of my love of nature. And Ted Hughes just brilliantly characterizes, personifies, and characters the majesty of this incredible creature. But he does so like through the gaze of seeing the animal in the confines of a zoo. Um, that concept, well, zoos themselves have become under scrutiny in recent years. There is certainly an ethical debate about the educational value, the role of in conservation that they play. Um, but yeah, I suppose this poem was written back in the 1960s, maybe 1950s, 60s. So attitudes were different then, but still we can see the universal themes of the respect for nature, the admiration for the creature, the power, the majesty, and also the sadness of the confinement. As we go through to signpost what we'll look at today, I've just referenced here poem analysis. I really like the simple, clean structure, different elements that you can look at when you're analysing any poem, be it the Jaguar today, as this example, or when you go on to look at your own nature poems or other themes. Within this presentation, I'm going to talk you through following an analysis of an analysis of the poem will follow some mind mapping of what the creature is. Like many of us won't have seen a jaguar here in Hong Kong. Big cats do prowl. We have some kind of like leopard cat, I believe, in the country parks, and used to have one of the biggest apex predators, the tiger, until it was hunted into extinction in this region. I think they shot the last one in 1930 or something. Not too far from here in Fanling. But these are the resources here. So first of all, we're gonna brainstorm this. Then we're gonna have a look at this video. We're going to describe the movement. See if we can find some good adjectival description, sensory description ourselves to cue ourselves for Ted Hughes. Ted Hughes is a brilliant, beautiful, deep voice, very thoughtful, poetic in nature itself. So, well, I'll let Ted Hughes read his own poem to you. And we've got a copy of the poem here so we can follow the language as Hughes reads and then perform an analysis stage by stage. Each of the stanzas, that's the verses, we call those stanzas, we can look at. And then we want to try to come back to this idea of being able to describe overarching aspects. These could potentially become the paragraph structures later on. And by zooming in to key details, we can really examine the craft of the writer. But then we want to kind of zoom out and provide an objective, measured analysis of overall movements in the poem. At a wider distance. Okay, so without further ado, let's just look at this wonderful animal. Now, what I'd like you to do is to perform a see, think, wonder routine. I'll give you a minute to pause and do that. When you look, what do you see? Simply use adjectives to describe the colour, the form, the gaze, the body parts, the gesture, the mannerisms, where he is. Then, what do you think? What are some of the thoughts that you have? And final stage, another 30 seconds. What do you wonder? What big ideas or themes? What would you like to know more about? So, see, think, wonder routine. See how you go. You can now pause the recording and give yourselves a moment. Okay, so when I look at this creature, I'm entranced, I think, by the eyes, first of all. Golden, orange, amber eyes, the kind of gaze that looks somehow deadly, but also somnolent, passive. His face is majestic, beautiful, uh, beautiful coat, dappled pattern, which provides really deep. You can see as his body enters into the bamboo forest just how effective that camouflage actually is. Look at the soft white tufted ears, very stern, regal bearing, hugely powerful shoulders, the sleekness. You can see here the softness of the paws and the fine whiskers as well. Those are just some of the things that I'm picking out here. What am I thinking? I'm thinking it's an incredible creature. I'm thinking it would be wonderful to see this in nature. I'm wondering perhaps how many of these are left in the wild. Where do these live? I'm wondering if they are endangered, a threat of extinction. Okay, well, you might have some other ideas and now, you'll have the chance to watch all that clip yourself, but I would look at his the strolling majesty, something the Disney animators capture brilliantly in the Lion King. The ease, the grace of movement. You might think about the silent approach, the low, stealthy gait, and then the power as it launches itself out of the bushes and surprises that poor capybara, who then takes his place in the grand circle of life. And so let's hear Ted Hughes read this poem. When he was a dishwasher, I think at London Zoo or maybe it was Chester Zoo, he was a young boy looking at this magnificent creature as he washed up from the cafeteria kitchen. And he noticed within a cage, zoos back in the 1950s and 60s, they do a better job now of trying to recreate the natural habitats of the creatures. They don't do a perfect job, let's be honest. We'd rather see them out in the wild, but at least there might be some attempt now to have, pools or shades or some kind of stimulation for the creatures. Back then, the zoos could be very like bleak places. I mean, let's find 1950s zoo elephant enclosure. I've chosen elephant enclosures because most zoos have these. I mean, look at how miserable that would be. This is 1969, so yeah. Oh, just look at the concrete structure, steel railings, no stimulation for these very, very intelligent creatures as well. So attitudes have changed, but you can see the bleakness of the surroundings. Let's find, if we can, the same thing, a jaguar enclosure perhaps. Here we see a jaguar in, well, this one's got like an open roof, Chester Zoo, a bit more space there. Here, look, the cage, mesh, the creature not in the wild anymore, but stuck there. Yeah, I'm thinking it's something like this. You see them pacing up and down all day, the kind of nervous behavior that you would associate with patterns of depression and anxiety and just utter boredom. Well, rather than me describe it, let's hand over to Ted Hughes. If we click on this clip, we can hear him speak. Don't drink beer, guys. Not yet, anyway.
The Jaguar. The apes yawn and adore their fleas in the sun. The parrots shriek as if they're on fire, or strut like cheap tarts to attract the stroller with the nut. Fatigued with indolence, tiger and lion lie still as the sun. The boa constrictor's coil is a fossil. Cage after cage seems empty, or stinks of sleepers from the breathing straw. It might be painted on a nursery wall. But who runs like the rest past these, arrives at a cage where the crowd stands, stares, mesmerized as a child at a dream, at a jaguar hurrying enraged through prison darkness after the drills of his eyes on a short, fierce fuse. Not in boredom, the eyes satisfied to be blind in fire, by the bang of blood in the brain, deaf the ear he spins from the bars. But there's no cage to him more than to the visionary his cell. His stride is wildernesses of freedom. The world rolls under the long thrust of his heel. Over the cage floor the horizons come.
It's a short poem, and it might be worth hearing that again. You have the link there if you want to play that. So at the beginning I said we want to organize ideas. There's the summary. So let's try and tackle these summary, the themes, the structure and form, literary devices, the analysis we can come to right now. So in stanza 1, stanza 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The apes yawn and adore their fleas in the sun. There's a full stop there at the end of the line. The parrots shriek as if they were on fire or strut like cheap tarts to attract the stroller with the nut. Fatigued with indolence, tiger and lion lie still as the sun. So the opening to this poem, I think, setting an atmosphere. We are at the zoo. Now, the fact you can feed peanuts to the parrots tells us this is slightly different. Yeah, it's back in time, 50s, 1960s. Should check that. When did Hughes write this? But he's remembering back his memories, somewhat autobiographical. As Hughes remembers being a boy. And this encounter with a jaguar. Now the jaguar seems, we're introduced to the jaguar here, and there is a kind of build up, a suspense as the speaker or narrator describe walking through the zoo and viewing the other creatures. Now, as so often happens actually in nature, animals do sleep a lot, but you can't help get over the fact they seem so bored with their existence. The apes yawn and adore their fleas in the sun. Yawn and adore. Can you hear that use of assonance? Assonance is the elongation or the exaggeration of the vowel sound within the middle of a word. So it's something to do with rhyming. But let's say we take this sentence. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. Can you hear those light, quick syllabic expressions? And the assonance there is quick and light, which reflects the movement of the fox. The apes, though, yawn and adore their fleas. So it's used to create a very sleepy, somnolent atmosphere. Apparently that's not a word, I've just invented that. Somnolent atmosphere. Now, Jane Goodall would tell you that apes, our closest relative in the animal kingdom, very intelligent creatures, social animals, but here they yawn and adore their fleas. The apes have been characterized to be very lazy and maybe slovenly. The parrots are described as the parrots strut like cheap tarts. Okay, well, these creatures are trying to get the attention of visitors who will feed them nuts, and in doing so, they've kind of prostituted themselves. They've subjugated themselves to perform for the viewer, the visitor. And Hughes, I think, is very weary, dismissive, derisive of these creatures. Now, the lions and tigers, surely he's thrilled to see them. Well, no. The tiger and lions sleep. They doze and are unaware of Hughes' presence. They might also be totally indifferent, but it's in stark contrast to the jaguar that prowls its cage, full of fury and instinct later on. So they lie still as the sun. Well, here, Hughes uses a technique. I'm going to deliberately space this right out so that we can tackle each one. So here there's this great leap between the first stanza and the second stanza. In writing, we say, well, you organize your paragraphs according to one idea, one topic, one time frame, one speaker. Hughes has deliberately dropped this off. Can you see fatigued with indolence? So we have verb actions, personification, as well as a technique called Cesara, operating to underline the stillness, the deadness of the atmosphere. Cesara is where we take a little break in the rhythm of the line through the use of punctuation marks. So here it's a comma. You could almost feel the tigers and lions vaguely stirring, like maybe an eye might flicker open and then they roll back asleep. They lie still as the sun. So the gap between the first, second stanza reinforces this stillness. So things about Cesara, stanza, the construction of ideas, that's about the structure of the poem, all right? So I'll explore that later on in my writing. Cesara kind of wraps this up as well, doesn't it? Lie still as the sun, full stop. Again, slows the pace and brings it to a soporific halt. Now, something else that then lies still is the boa constrictor. It's a thing if you copy off the internet, sometimes some spelling mistakes occur. The boa constrictor's coil is a fossil. So figurative language is used repeatedly in an imaginative sense to reflect the stillness of the other zoo creatures. The fact that the boa is like a fossil emphasizes I can't even spell it. Highlights the sort of ancient nature of this creature that has been around since the dawn of time. There are fossil records of snakes and sharks and crocodiles. They were kind of perfect when they came out of evolution millions of years ago. They haven't really adapted. I think they've become maybe smaller, less gigantic, but still perfectly formed predators. Hughes really loves a predator. He talks about the instinct of sharks, like their killer instinct is something that Hughes really admires and discusses in other poems. The structure of the poem is chronological in that we have the speaker, or the subject, is walking through the zoo. Cage after cage seems empty, or stinks of sleepers. Cage after cage, repetition highlights the emptiness of the zoo, the exasperation, the sense of the lack of wonder of the young boy or visitor whose perspective we're being allowed into. And there are these empty cages, stinks of sleepers from breathing straw, so you can't see anything. There's creatures lying. It might be painted on a nursery wall. Okay, so here there's quite like a bleak, bereft, almost hopeless, or certainly like underwhelming feeling as you go to the zoo to see all these creatures. But what's left? Well, you can't see anything. You can maybe smell them, but all that's left is all you can see are the paintings of them on the wall. But here we see the pace quicken. But who runs like the rest past these arrives at a cage where the crowd stands, stares, mesmerized. Can you see that the use of verbs runs and mesmerized, and the quickening of the pace from yawns and adores there, flees still as the sun, but who runs like the rest past these arrives. We have the use of quick syllabic elements together with, it's a form of alliteration called sibilance. That's the repetition of the S sound. Creates the quickening of the pace as the subject races past the cages to stand with the crowd, who are amazed and staring in at the Jaguar. It reminds me of Baz Luhrmann's introduction of Gatsby, or indeed F. Scott Fitzgerald's introduction of Gatsby for the first time. There's this build-up of suspense, and we want to know what's there. We can see everyone staring. We want to be part of the crowd, and then jostling for position, elbowing in, making sure you can get to the front. And you see then, as a child at a dream, a Jaguar hurrying enraged. I'm not sure if that's meant to be repeated there. We should check that. But yeah, this is all like the build-up of the suspense and wonder. The fact that it's as a child at a dream, but the person here knows the Jaguar. It's like they've come to see the Jaguar specifically. So it's like every time they return, either in person as a child or as an adult in memory, the vision of the Jaguar always provokes a sense of wonder. Now let's have a look at the Jaguar. The Jaguar is hurrying and enraged through prisoned darkness after the drills of his eyes. What an amazing first introduction to the creature. The Cesara there, the pause, just allows us to really glimpse and see the quickness of the Jaguar. And the Jaguar is pacing up and down. It's furious at having, is it furious at being captive? It wants to break free of its bars. I mean, the natural territory of a Jaguar would be many hundreds of kilometres, and here it is, trapped into a small thing, with everyone gawking at it as well. Remember what we said about how beautiful and majestic this creature is, and then here we've got this, group of people staring at it. So I think in contrast, the crowd of humans seem stupid, almost like the apes that were mentioned earlier. But the jaguar is hurrying. The jaguar still has purpose, still has instinct. Yes, it is imprisoned, but it still retains its majesty. It has not compromised itself, not like those slutty cheap parrots earlier, or those lazy yawning apes, or the tiger and the lion who've simply given up. The jaguar is compelling. A ball of energy, a prime specimen on a short, fierce fuse. Look at that. It's kind of like a metronomic device where the one syllable words are coiled up like the potential spring of this ambush hunter. Not in boredom, hyphen, the eye satisfied to be blind in fire, by the bang of blood in the brain, deaf the ear. Well, here we can see that alliteration is used. So metronomic, tick tock, but actually what we're witnessing here is the heartbeat of the creature. And the heartbeat provides the blood, the fire, the fuse, the right to kill. And it's if you now hold your hands over your ears, you could hear you can hear that pulse, that life force beating in your own ears, except it with a jaguar, it's a kind of a pure life, or life force, yeah, pure life force permeating the presence of the creature. And it provides the rhythm of the, I'm going to have to, let me just get rid of that, it's annoying me. It provides the rhythm of movement of the pacing of the jaguar, back and forth and back and forth within its cell. The use of hyphen here, I think hyphens used at the end of the lines are a structural device used to emphasize the quick turning motion of the animal. Okay, so the essence of the creature can be captured not just in the words used to describe it, but also the way in which the words are laid out on the page, as well as the use of punctuation to capture movement, sensation. More than to the visionary his cell. So personification captures the Jaguar as a visionary. We describe people like maybe artists, poets, luminaries, the most brilliant minds, visionaries, people who see the future. And so as we stare dimly in at this creature, he's thinking, what is he thinking? I think what Hughes admires about predators is they do not think, they act only purely on instinct. It's not like Hamlet where they're constantly hampered by thought and prevarication. They just simply act and do. And so the essence of his being is still retained. His stride is wildernesses of freedom. At this point, we start to see maybe like the stride elongate. The lineation becomes longer at this point. This seems to mimic the lengthening of the Jaguar's stride, and his freedom and ease of movement are revealed here. The world rolls under the long thrust of his heel. There's beautiful construction in this line. This line might capture ultimately how Hughes thinks and feels about this creature. The world rolls, assonance used here to capture the languid motion, the sense of entitlement and power, the commanding presence that the Jaguar has. Over the cage floor, the horizons come. So with this final word, we're left. The poem finishes with the Jaguar in perpetual motion. There is still a future hope. The Jaguar's spirit is still intact. So instead of perhaps viewing the creature as bored by its environment, Hughes describes the fact that it remains free within its own mind and within its limitations because of the beauty and power inherent within the creature. I think it's a lovely poem, and lots we could say. I will add these comments to the document and share this out so you can use this as you go to approach and think about how you put these ideas into then a coherent structure. The next thing I would be looking to do is to highlight these elements and group them according to these sorts of ideas. Okay, so maybe do some color coding in your annotations.